All right, let's dive into one of the greatest rivalries in the history of science. We're talking about two absolute giants, Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch. You see, their fierce and often pretty nasty competition wasn't just for some trophy. It was a battle of ideas that literally dragged medicine out of the Dark Ages and, no exaggeration, changed our world forever.
To really get what a huge deal this was, you gotta transport yourself back in time. I mean, imagine a world where the deadliest diseases, cholera, tuberculosis, they just seemed to appear out of thin air. It was the biggest medical mystery of the age. Where on earth did sickness actually come from?
Well, for centuries, the best answer anyone had was a theory called spontaneous generation. The basic idea was that life, and disease with it, could just arise from things that weren't alive. So if you got sick, you weren't infected. No, the sickness was thought to just bubble up from rotting garbage or from breathing in bad air, a concept they called miasma. Sounds wild to us now, right? But this was mainstream science. This was the world Pasteur was about to blow apart.
And that brings us to our first main character, a brilliant French chemist, Louis Pasteur. He was completely convinced that this whole spontaneous generation thing was just wrong. He had a hunch that something else was going on, something tiny, something invisible.
And this is the year it all kicks off. In 1861, Pasteur publishes his germ theory. It's a radical idea that says, hey, you know what's really making things rot and making people sick? It's microscopic living things. It's germs.
But here's the thing. Pasteur didn't just talk the talk. He proved it with this incredibly elegant experiment. Okay, so check this out. He took these special flasks with long curved swan necks. He'd boil broth inside them to kill anything living. Now that clever curve in the neck let air in, but it trapped any dust or microbes floating around. And guess what? As long as that neck was on, the broth stayed perfectly clear for months. But the second he snapped off the neck and let those airborne germs fall in, it went bad fast.
The results were just undeniable. It wasn't some mysterious bad air causing the decay. It was the invisible organisms that were hitching a ride in the air. This one idea, the germ theory, became the foundation for all of modern microbiology. But you know, proving germs exist, that was just round one. The real fight was just getting started.
So as Pasteur's fame is exploding in France, a new challenger is quietly rising in Germany. He's a meticulous, laser-focused country doctor named Robert Koch, and he's about to take Pasteur's big idea and crank the precision up to a whole new level.
Now, their rivalry was about more than just national pride, although with the Franco-Prussian War still fresh in everyone's minds, that was definitely a big part of it. It was really a fundamental clash of scientific styles. You had Pasteur, the brilliant showman, all about these big public demonstrations and creating ways to prevent disease. And then you had Koch, the hardcore lab scientist, who was obsessed with precise identification and absolute, rigorous proof.
You see, Koch looked at Pasteur's work and thought, okay, that's a great start, but it's not enough. He wasn't happy just saying germs cause disease. He wanted to prove exactly which microscopic bug caused exactly which disease, with zero room for doubt. And man, did he deliver. Koch basically invented the tools to do it. He came up with new ways to stain bacteria with colorful dyes, which made them pop right out under a microscope. This let him isolate one specific type of bacterium and prove it was the cause of one specific illness. His absolute masterpiece came in 1882 when he identified the tiny culprit behind tuberculosis, which at the time was one of the biggest killers on the planet.
So, with both of these guys making these incredible discoveries, their competition just went into overdrive. It became this frantic, high-stakes race, not just for fame, but to actually save lives from the deadliest diseases known to humanity.
And the pace of discovery was just breathtaking. I mean, look at this. In just a handful of years, Pasteur develops vaccines for chicken cholera and anthrax. Boom. Then Koch nails down the TB bacterium. Boom. Just 3 years after that, Pasteur creates his legendary rabies vaccine. Their rivalry was fueling one of the most productive and game-changing periods in the entire history of medicine.
And true to form, Pasteur, being the showman he was, didn't just publish his findings in some dusty journal. Oh no, for his anthrax vaccine in 1881, he staged this huge, dramatic public trial. He vaccinated a bunch of sheep, left another group unprotected, and then he injected them all with a deadly dose of anthrax. A few days later, the world watched as the vaccinated sheep were perfectly fine, just munching on grass, while the unvaccinated ones were all dead. It was a spectacular public victory.
But his most famous moment, the one that made him a legend, came in 1885. A 9-year-old boy named Joseph Meister was dragged to his lab after being horribly mauled by a rabid dog. Back then, rabies was a 100% death sentence. In a massive gamble, Pasteur gave the boy his new, totally untested vaccine. And the boy lived. It was seen as a miracle of the modern age, proof that science could actually conquer these terrifying diseases.
So, while Pasteur was out there performing public miracles, Koch was in his lab building the very rule book of science. He developed what we now call Koch's postulates, a super strict 4-step checklist that a scientist had to meet to prove a specific microbe causes a specific disease. This became the absolute gold standard. It turned bacteriology from educated guesswork into a rigorous, repeatable science. From then on, if you wanted to claim you found the cause of a disease, you had to play by Koch's rules.
So, who won? The Frenchman or the German? The showman or the methodical scientist? Well, the answer, as it turns out, is a whole lot more interesting than that.
When you really look at what they left behind, you realize they weren't just competitors. They were like two sides of the same revolutionary coin. Pasteur pioneered public health and immunology, focusing on preventing disease with vaccines. Koch, on the other hand, built the field of modern bacteriology, focusing on identifying diseases with precise lab science. One taught us how to stop infections before they start. The other taught us how to find them when they do.
So in the end, their epic rivalry didn't produce a single victor. The constant push and pull between Pasteur's grand vision and Koch's methodical rigor created something far bigger than either of them could have achieved alone. It produced a victory for every single one of us.
Seriously, just stop and think about the world they built. The reason you wash your hands, that's them. The vaccines that have saved billions of lives, them. Their work laid the direct foundation for antibiotics. But maybe most importantly, they turned medicine from an art of guesswork into a true science based on cold, hard evidence. They took a world that was ruled by superstition and fear, and they replaced it with a world of evidence and control. They proved that this microscopic universe, even though we can't see it, wasn't some unknowable mystery. It could be studied, it could be understood, and it could be beaten.
And that kind of leaves you with a final thought, doesn't it? Their competition accelerated progress at a rate nobody thought was possible. It really makes you wonder, what's the great scientific rivalry of our time? Is it in AI? Space exploration? Gene editing? Who are the Pasteurs and the Kochs of today, whose competition is busy shaping the world of tomorrow?